Okay, hello. So, the sustainable startup. That's what I'm here to talk about today. My name's Rachel, and I run an organisation called Our Pledge. And I'm going to be talking to you today about building climate conscious principles into your business from day one. So I thought I'd take a step back and just let you know a bit about me so that you know who's talking to you today. And I thought it was probably most relevant to say that I am also a business owner and a founder of a startup. So I am and have been in the same shoes as many people hopefully here today and on this session. So I'm speaking from the position of somebody who's trying to do and is doing what I'm talking about today. On the topic of not just startups, but sustainable startups, I would say I've been a sort of gentle activist. So this is something I've done for most of my adult life, I suppose. I have, in one way or another, engaged with trying to raise awareness of what is now known as a climate crisis. And so part of that has been doing some education, self-education, but I'm also a carbon savvy ambassador, which means I've done some training around carbon footprints. And I'm currently a bio-leadership fellow, which means that some of my self-education and the education I'm undertaking at the moment is actually working with nature, which I've found to be an incredibly useful teacher. So yes, I am a bit of a hippie. I'm also an urbanite. I live in a city, and so I'm not sort of all about giving up everything and becoming completely self-sustainable. And I would say quite upfront that, you know, I'm, as many of us are, also to a certain extent a hypocrite, because the systems that we live within don't make it very easy for us to be completely sustainable. And I run a business and I like going out, and you know, I have a social life and a working life, and that often means that I'm engaging with things that you know, a computer, a phone, that perhaps don't 100% lean into my ideals. So I think that's something just to like sit with and expect is part of this journey, and to be kind of okay with it because it is the way it is. And I'm also, I like to think, quite a rational optimist. So you know, I think that there is hope for embedding sustainable principles in what we do. I think that we can have an impact. I think that we have to face facts that things are the way they are, and you know, it's looking dicey out there sometimes, but there are ways and means that we can collectively come together and make things better. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. The organisation that I run, just quickly, is a startup social enterprise. We use technology in different formats, and one of the things that I really believe in is empowering communities. So collective action is something I'm really passionate about, really interested in. And you know, even in the context of today, I participate as one of a number of startups. We are a collective, we can collaborate. I do collaborate. I'm on a WhatsApp group. I maybe know some of you from that group who are on this call today, who talk about our projects and support each other. And I always want to think about local economic health. So again, health, economics is sometimes framed within the context of growth. And you've probably heard, if you're interested in sustainability, the term or the phrase that you can't have infinite growth on a finite planet. So I think we can't always frame economic success within growth, but we can think about economic health, where, you know, are we self-sustaining? Sustainability in a different meaning. So we fundraise for our clients using a pledge to buy, pledge to supply system, a bit like crowdfunding. We do market research, we do event management, we do visualization, and we do training. So that's why I'm here today as well. Today's webinar. So what I wanted to do was effectively share our roadmap. So what do we at Our Pledge use to embed climate conscious principles in our business? And what I would say again is this is like a set of prompts and invitations, or a kind of menu of things that you could do, and just an invitation actually really to think maybe slightly differently. And again, I don't know who's in the room, so I'm very aware that some people this will be very familiar territory, and to others maybe it's a bit newer. And there will be time at the end for a Q&A. And if you have questions, I can't see the chat, but my colleague Alice is here with me, co-founder of Our Pledge, and she'll be gathering some of those questions in the chat and also sharing some links to some resources that I'm going to mention over the next 45 minutes. But yeah, I just want to say again, this is like a sort of broad spectrum snapshot of all the things that you could think about doing. So just take it lightly, and I think really sit with, what you can do. Everyone's unique. You are in your own unique situation. You have your own business mission and goals, and that is at the core of the reason why you're here, probably, and the reason you spend a lot of your time doing what you do. So that really needs to be a priority, because if that gets lost, then you'll get lost. And so I think, the better you do, the more room you'll have, the more capacity you'll have to think about sustainability and really do it well. So I suppose the message is don't fret. You can't do everything. You probably have a million and one things to do already. So just do what you can. So that's a kind of just a tone setter for today. Why sustainable business at all? Why should business be sustainable? Well, this is a unreadable graph because there's so much information on it, but Alice will put a link in the chat to this slide, which is a depiction of what's known as the Great Acceleration. And again, I'm sure this is nothing new to most of you, but I love the impact of the visualization here, which effectively on the left-hand side is charting, or the red side is charting socioeconomic trends, so human impact trends over the past 250 years. And you can see that human beings came along, did a little bit, and then have over the past century done drastically more, had drastically more activity and interactions with the planet and with natural systems. And in this slide, you can see everything from paper production to tourism to telecommunication to urban living. And as those things have accelerated, so have the impacts and the negative impacts, outcomes on Earth systems. So on the right-hand side in the blue, you can see that as those human trends have accelerated, so have some negative things within the system that we live in. So carbon dioxide is on the increase, nitrous oxide is on the increase, methane is on the increase, tropical forest deforestation is on the increase. So we know all of this stuff, but I just think it's quite useful to see it all in one picture. We are the cause, or there is a correlation there that can't be denied. And so sustainability, for a start, we have to rein it in, and we can't keep accelerating. And so that is why sustainability. And then why business? So I saw this statistic recently. I thought it was really interesting. Waltham Forest, where I'm based, where Our Pledge is based, currently has a total of 11,855 businesses, and a large majority of those are micro businesses with less than 10 employees. So that's probably most people who work in a startup, I imagine. So that's just in Waltham Forest alone. So there are a lot of us. And the contribution that small and micro businesses make to the economy, so what do we give to the economy, is over £100 million. So, there are a lot of us, we are many, and we are powerful. So what we do and the choices that we make do matter. And again, I think you probably heard that saying, but there's a cartoon and it says, what's one straw, plastic straw, said 8 billion people. So I think, we may feel like our isolated action is irrelevant, but it's not. Okay, so what do we mean by sustainability? Again, depending on your existing knowledge, you may be able to answer this very easily, but I think there are a lot of terms that fly around that feel quite weighty and quite stressful, I suppose, like, oh God, we're supposed to be carbon neutral and net zero and zero waste and, which one of those do I aspire to, and how do I do it, and what are the maths, and is it greenwash, and it just becomes a bit of a fog. And then at the other end, you've got some measurables, you've got some resources there that you might look at and think, well, okay, I'm going to use the UN's Sustainable Development Goals as a guide, or you might look at ethical consumer, which I really recommend you do, or you might think about getting B Corp accreditation. And those things are all really, really relevant and useful and good to look into. But actually, I think as you start your business and on a day-to-day, and in the spirit of kind of recognizing capacity and the extreme sort of overwhelm that we can face when we start thinking about these things, I'm just going to say park those, put them on a pinboard and say, great, I'll come back to those later. Yes, I'm going to look at the UN's SDGs. I'm going to work out which ones I align with. Maybe one day I'll do B Corp accreditation. Don't worry about it for now. From my perspective, I think the most powerful change that you can make, and something that's accessible and doesn't cost anything, is just to start thinking sustainably. So that's what I'm going to talk about now. And for the rest of this presentation, is just some ways to think sustainably and some actions that you can take in that spirit. So what does that mean? Well, a phrase that had a huge impact on me was the understanding that there is no such place as a way. So when I grew up being told, don't litter, don't throw things away, and that really stuck with me as I was growing up. You throw it away and then your job is done, and you've done the right thing by your environment because it's nice and clean and tidy. But actually, there is no such place as a way. Of course, when you throw something in a bin, it has a whole life cycle beyond that interaction. And remembering that, oh, I've thrown it away, but it hasn't gone, it hasn't magically disappeared. It's probably actually made its way to a beach somewhere halfway across the world. That is something that I just hold with me when I'm in the stress and the mess of day to day, to think, hang on, how do I be mindful of the disconnect that we live and work with every day that has taught us that we just throw things away and somebody else takes care of it. So the thing that I like to reference there is life cycle, and ultimately to think, where has something that I'm holding in my hand, where has this come from, and when I finish with it, where is it going to go? And the answer to both of those questions is always the earth. So whatever you are using, holding, interacting with, it's come from the earth and it's going to go back to the earth. And so that life cycle thinking is just one reframing of some of the choices that you might want to make, or the things that you perhaps buy. And ideally, what we want to start thinking about is how many steps are there, how many removes are there from the original form of something to me, and then after me back to original form. And trying to shorten those is positive. So that's one thing to think about. Obviously, you want to think about impact. So if I do throw this away, what is the impact? Where's it going to go? Who's going to suffer as a result of it, potentially? And actually, in terms of sustainable thinking, something that I've learned from spending a lot of time in Wales, actually, is to think about future generations. So we're not very good at long-term thinking. But in Wales, there is actually a piece of legislation that's called the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. And it means that no work can be done. And again, obviously, it's a large piece of legislation, but the spirit of it is that no work can be done that will harm the well-being of future generations. So people who are yet to be born, effectively. So just thinking about that and sort of leaning into the fact that what we do now does have resonance far beyond what we can even see or understand, probably. So thinking about that is useful. So terms like circular, long-term, and ecosystemic are super useful. And ecosystemic, just to ground ourselves in the fact that everything comes from the earth, which is an ecosystem. We exist within an ecosystem, and it's going to go back to an ecosystem. So there's many, many multiple moving parts to the ways that we interact with the world and how the world interacts with itself. So I want to talk about one particular ecosystem that you will be all too familiar with, and that is the business ecosystem. So this is where you have some control, unless you have a cat like I do, who I've shut out actually, because otherwise she would be all over the keyboard like the one in this picture. So as far as you can be in control, pet dependent, this is something where you can make some choices to make a difference. What is in your business ecosystem? Well, just to make life easier, I thought we'll divide this up into some tangibles and some intangibles, or conceptuals. So in the tangible category, I think we can say things like premises, hardware. So it could be like nuts and bolts and nails if you're making things, and it could be hard drives if you are working with digital information. You might have products coming in and out. You may have vehicles that you use to deliver things or transport yourself around. And of course, food and drink that you put into yourself so that you can do your job. And then there are the intangibles. So things like your business structure, your finances, the way that you show up online, the energy that you use, and actually, super importantly, the well-being of you and your staff and your friends and family and your business ecosystem. So those are the ways that I sort of divide that up. And again, just digging a bit deeper, I'm going to go through a few of these now and just give you some suggestions of actions or thoughts that you can take. So these are kind of invitations to think about, how might I do this differently, or is this sustainable? So you can sort of use this again as a jumping off point for your own business ecosystem. So again, startups. We're here in Startup Day, so some of you may even be in the process of thinking about what type of company you are, and considering whether you're a limited company or a KIC or a social enterprise or a charity or a co-op even, can be part of the process of assessing your values. And of course, you have your articles of association, so you can even adjust those to reflect your business model or your business mission, I suppose is a better way to put that. So right from the get-go, you can start to think about sustainability as part of the fabric of your business. And one thing to say, just obviously coming out of COP, I think there is more and more an awareness of the urgency of what's going on, and that I think we're going to see more and more legislation coming in to say we have to. I mean, it's already started with plastic bags and straws and cotton buds and things like that. So starting with this mindset is going to be super helpful as you go forward, because you won't be sort of having to retrofit. But yeah, so that's just a sort of aside. But yeah, so if you're starting this way, then you're on good feet. So yes, company type, you can think about bank account. That is another way of really making some impactful choices. When you're thinking about your business bank account, you can obviously go to a traditional bank like HSBC or Barclays. You could go to a challenger bank like Starling or Monzo, or you can go to a specifically ethical bank like Triodos. And that is those are the choices for the most part that you have. And you might want to, if you're thinking about banking with a traditional bank, you might want to just think about who else, whose interests do they serve, who are their clients, where does your money that they hold get invested? Because there's been a lot of lid lifting, I suppose, around traditional banks to say, well, hang on, who are you Who are you supporting here? Whose interests are you serving? So that's something that you can think about. And obviously, again, down to your situation, you've got to make the best choice for you so that you can do your business well. So these are just, as I say, invitations. You will likely have an accountant. Again, if you're really dedicated to having a sustainability mission, you might want to find an accountant, and indeed other members of your team who have an awareness of what you're doing and an empathy for what you're doing. So when you're looking at accountants, you can maybe see who their other clients are, do they understand your business and your mission, and so on. And then actually one thing that does, I think, get forgotten is that even if we're doing everything sort of lightly in the digital space, there is, all that data that we use and share has to live somewhere, has to be hosted somewhere. And that is probably a huge warehouse full of servers that's creating an enormous amount of heat and taking a lot of energy. So you can also look at your web hosting provider. You can look at whether they have a green carbon neutral package, how they do that. So yeah, it's just kind of worth asking the question. And there are some processes you can go through to keep your website light as well. If you're interested in that, that's something that you can do. Just to say, I will share my email address at the end of the presentation, and there will be room for a Q&A at the end as well. I'm not going to look at the Q&A whilst I go through, so I'll just come back to that at the end as well if you've been putting questions in the chat. So yes, physical infrastructure. So presumably you are working somewhere, and that may be an office space or a retail space, or it might be your home. So I would say with your premises, do control what you can. So unless you're building your workspace from scratch, which sounds super fun, but probably out of everyone's scope or most people's scope, you can think about your decor, the materials that you use, and so on. Where do you get your furniture from, and so on? Because you can have recycled paint, you could use refurbished materials to build your shelves or to build your counter or whatever it might be that you need in your space. You can often find all sorts of ways to recycle, upcycle, and make sure that things are as good and ethical as possible. Computers and phones, obviously this is a very tricky area, but if you want to try and move into the sort of sustainability space, you can get refurbished. So both my computer and my phone are refurbished, and they work completely fine. So that just means they've got a second life beyond somebody who obviously got them and then didn't use them for whatever reason, or only used them a little bit. And there is the option to get a Fairphone. I don't have a Fairphone, but once I've absolutely rinsed the phone I have, I probably will get one. They're getting better and better. Printing and copying, I mean, this is a pretty basic thing. Definitely use recycled and recyclable paper and ink. It's super accessible. You can find it anywhere in Tesco's and so on, and that should be a baseline, I would say. And then things like cleaning products. So again, within your space, if you're thinking sustainably and you're thinking about impact and you're thinking about things going back to the natural world, cleaning products that we use every day can be quite toxic and damaging. And so if you can, think about using ethical cleaning products, and if you can get those in a refill space, then that's super good as well, but that's not always accessible to everyone. And then energy, we all need energy, so there are, of course, as you know, a variety of renewable energy suppliers out there, so that is another way to kind of make a quick change and do some good. Products. So you may be selling products, or making or selling products. So you'll be having products coming into your business and products going out potentially. So just some things to think about. The packaging. If you are sending products out, can your packaging be recycled? So is it recyclable? Is it itself recycled? Is it home compostable? That's even better. And just to flag that compostability is quite a grey area. So really you want to be looking for home compostable, because things that are listed as compostable sometimes have to go through an industrial composter, and that's a whole process that doesn't often happen, or it doesn't easily happen. Even better than that, if you can encourage your customers to bring their own jars or refill containers, then that's fantastic. And maybe think about things like non-toxic inks. Again, storage. So going back to my original point about community and collective actions, things like storage and delivery, there are some opportunities, I think, to potentially share storage and or delivery. So I'll come to delivery in a minute. Storage, I mean, that's just so dependent on where you are and what you need. So there's not too much to say about that. But buying in bulk, if you have somewhere to store it, can be a good way to reduce your footprint. If you are delivering goods, then do look at zero emissions options. Something like Zedify in London is really good. I think they're beyond London as well, and I'm not sure. But yeah, so zero emissions vehicles, really good. And again, can you share? Can you rather than having your delivery van going out and the next door shop going, maybe roughly this, could you collaborate on that within reason? Waste disposal, so obviously you want to be thinking about recycling and reusing. And then do think about your community, who's around you, who might want the things that you don't want. One woman's waste is another woman's treasure. And so if there is a community garden around you, maybe you could give your food scraps to them for the compost, or it may be that you have large tubs that somebody else could use for paint, or who knows what. I think once you start getting to know people in your community, you'll find somebody who wants the most unusual things. So that's worth thinking about. And then obviously you've got your marketing around your products. So presumably a lot of that's online, but if you are printing, then think about recycling, whether you're using recycled paper or if the paper can be recycled, using non-toxic inks. And, have faith in some word of mouth and encourage people to do your marketing for you, sort of paper free. Travel and transport's another area. So if you're thinking sustainably to and from work, then that's a good start as well. Getting into the mindset on the daily commute, if you still have one. So yeah. And one thing that I do think is an interesting pattern is that it tends to be what's good for the planet tends to be quite good for humans. So yeah, active travel is healthier than non-active travel. So if you can walk or cycle, or take an e-bike, then that's great. Obviously, that's not always practical. So you can, if you do have to drive, can you carpool? Can you share the journey with someone else? And obviously, a lot of this has been reduced recently because of a global pandemic. So a lot of us are working from home, and that has seen a lot of decreased transport to and from work. So that's positive, although I don't know if it's going to stay that way. Food, again, this is another area, quite an easy win. Things like meat-free Mondays have made a huge difference. And you may think, well, I just have one meat-free meal a week or a month or whatever it is, but actually collectively as a nation we have massively reduced our impact because we have used less meat and dairy products. So again, just little things can make a difference. So obviously you can bring your own food. It's something that I always think I should do and I don't get around to it very often. But yeah, cooking and bringing your own food means you're not buying sandwiches and crisp packets and throwing them away. Thinking about reduced meat and dairy or locally sourced. And locally sourced goes back to that original, how far has something come and how many iterations has it had between its origins and you, and then where's it going to go? So locally sourced tends to remove stages of that process. So that's the food that you eat. If you have staff and you're providing them food, and you can do that in a COVID-safe way, particularly if you're sharing food, then that's great. Encouraging reduced meat and dairy. So maybe you do meat-free Monday in the office on once a week or once a month. Again, reduce packaging, things like tea and coffee. I've seen so many workspaces where tea and coffee is in individual sachets, and you've got little milks and little sugars, and really that's not necessary. So that's something to bear in mind. Again, COVID safely, and locally sourced is always good. If you're selling food, all of the above. And if you're using food in the food that you sell, then thinking about buying bulk, buying local, and with reduced packaging is a good thing. So those are some headlines and thoughts, and I guess just some kind of menu headings really for you to think about. Oh, I could do a little change. Maybe I'll cycle to work one day a week, and that can make a difference. And I mentioned earlier about being a carbon savvy ambassador. I really love the tone of Carbon Savvy, because it very much says, look, reducing your carbon footprint can actually lead to a better sense of well-being in lots of ways. And what they do have, if you just want a sense of well-being from measuring what you're doing and seeing it you're doing better, they have some really useful calculators. So you can measure your travel footprint and your food footprint and things like that. So that's just a good place to start. You might do one thing and that will be fantastic, and you might inspire other people to do one thing as well, and then who knows what domino effect that's going to have. I do, however, want to say one final thing. So you can just kick back and relax now. Maybe you've had enough, you've got enough information and you know what you're going to go away and do. But I just want to go back to the first slide where we had the great acceleration and talking about sustainability. Well, we're up here. Do we want to sustain this, or do we want to tip the curve? And so a lot of the work that I do talks not only about sustainability, but also about regeneration and regenerative practice. So not just keeping the world as it is when we find it, but leaving it better than when we found it. And I just think that's a kind of interesting provocation to think about, well, how could I have a positive impact? How can I leave this place better than I found it? And there are just some spaces to think about that. So your immediate surroundings, can you plant things where you are, where you work? Can you have a window box, for example? Can you have some pots outside the front of your shop, or can you have plants in your office that are going to benefit from you watering them, and the people around you are going to benefit from them? Maybe you're going to have increased access to water and light in the building that you come into, because that will then make you and your staff feel better. You've also got your local surroundings. So is there within your community a garden, a community garden, or other shared space that you could perhaps contribute to in some way? Again, if you have a food related business, could you give your scraps to the community garden? If you drink a lot of coffee, could you give them your coffee grounds? Can you support them in another way? So just thinking about ways to kind of give back. And obviously it doesn't have to be local in terms of your region, but it could be that people have an interest that is local to yours, so similar to yours, and can you collectively do something together just to give back? So that's just a final kind of beyond sustainability. That can be another presentation. So some guidelines. You've got thinking about things from a circular perspective, long-term thinking, ecosystemic thinking, priorities. Obviously you can't do everything. Just do what you can. Feel good about it, and have a think about your impact, or measure your impact if you can with some of those tools. Resources, I really recommend a subscription to Ethical Consumer. I find it an incredibly useful resource. It's a way to just check in with brands to see how they are rated according to a range of different measurements. So that's everything from climate to how they treat their staff to their kind of legal and tax records. I think a subscription is about £26 for the year, and I refer to it when I'm making decisions about who to work with in terms of banks and that kind of thing. And also they have beauty products and all sorts of things. So it's very useful and can help you make an educated decision. I mentioned the carbon savvy calculators. Again, this whole presentation really has been about mindset, thinking about things from a sustainable mindset. So if you've got that with you, then that's a good resource. And as I said, community is a huge thing for me and for us. So we all have each other. You've got me. I'll put my email address at the end so you can send me an email. And nature. If we're thinking about sustainability, it's probably because we want to preserve the natural world. And hopefully most of us have access to some kind of green space. And that is a very useful place to go and think about what we're doing and why we're doing it. So don't forget that nature herself is a resource as well. So I give you the invitation to think about one thing you could action today that will start you on your journey. If you're not already doing it, which I'm sure many of us are, and if it's useful, you can make a list, because the temptation is to be like, oh my God, I'm going to become the next net zero something, and set yourself a huge target that's not practical or possible, and then give up. So don't do that. Make a little list of things you think you could do. Mark each action with like, is it easy or is it hard? Is it big impact or small impact? And go for an easy one first, because then that's going to give you good feedback and you will want to do more. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour. Here's my email address. Please feel free to send me a message if you would like, or you can follow us on Instagram, where we can also answer questions as well. Okay, how do I champion this and get others on the team involved? Good question. I think you've just got to live it. You've got to practice what you preach, I think, is the key thing. And I guess, yeah, living by example is just very powerful. I had a good conversation yesterday with somebody about letting go of outcomes. You know, you never know who you've influenced. And I think of many people that I saw speak at a talk or a conference or something, and they have no idea that they empowered me or influenced me to take the actions that I do today. So I think having the self-belief that you doing what you believe is right will get other people on board. You can also obviously be very vocal about that, and say to your team, this is our values. I mean, you might want to do a values workshop. That's something that we did actually, which was a great way of kind of seeing, for me to share my values and for the team to also come on board with their values. So that is something that I really recommend. It was an amazing workshop. And of course, our values aren't just in sustainability. The other thing you could do is potentially, if you have the capacity within your team, is to sort of have a carbon or a sustainability ambassador. So that's something else that you might want to think about. So those are a couple of ways. I'll keep thinking about that. Who is my sustainability role model? Who is my sustainability role model? I really love the peace activist Satish Kumar. I found his magazine that he edited for a long time. It's a magazine called Resurgence magazine. But he was somebody who, in the late 60s actually, walked around the world with no money for peace. And he ended up going to the leaders of the 4 nuclear nations of the world. Just through the act of walking, he raised enormous amounts of awareness, and he became I guess a kind of leader and a writer and somebody, but the majority of his work, he's somebody that has kind of educated. He's part of the founder of Schumacher College. But anyway, he's definitely somebody who put one foot in front of the other and just kept going and trusting that what he did would have the right impact on the right people. And so I recommend reading any of his books. He's written several, and he does a lot of writing about walking. Resurgence magazine definitely touches on the kind of interconnectedness of all things. So sustainability doesn't really exist in a vacuum or in isolation. All things need to be approached with a sustainable lens. So that's one person. And then I absolutely rate Naomi Klein. I love her writing. I love her if she's ever doing a talk, I love to go and hear her speak. She's super passionate, and she's super, again, pragmatic, and quite powerful, and she's very fierce. And so I would say those are two ends of the spectrum. Satish is very peaceful and very slow, and Naomi is super fiery. And I would definitely recommend reading any of her books, or looking up any of her articles, or listening to her on wherever you can find her speak, actually. I don't think there are any other questions that I can see. So one thing to say is that this session is going to be on the BIPC YouTube channel at some point in future. So this will be available to watch again if you want to come back to any of those points. Then you can, or if you want to share this with your team, actually, this might be a way to get the conversation going, is to show this, or to attend any of the sessions. Again, like Carbon Savvy do some sessions. They're very accessible. You can dip in and maybe as a team you might just want to go to one of those and talk about it afterwards. Or you could just create your own questions. You could have a topic or a theme, and just sit down over a coffee and say, okay, well, hang on, how could we be more sustainable with our business practice? So that's another thing to say. And I think that's pretty much everything from us. So yeah, feel free to email. Do follow us on Instagram. It's been such a pleasure to be asked to do this presentation. I found it very useful to check in with myself. So thanks to the British Library for hosting us. Thanks to BIPC, and I hope everyone has a great day in all your other sessions as well.